Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports, where today we're going to talk a little bit more about Kyrie Irving. I hope you were able to stop into my live stream yesterday, where we covered the recent trader request on Kyrie Irving. And I kind of wanted to have a takeaway video from that, where we look at what Kyrie Irving is really valued at on the market. I think that's one of the biggest things you guys have to understand here in this video is I'm going to mock trades. I'm going to present some trades, and you might be saying, well, that's not very good value for Kyrie Irving. There's a few steps in this, right? First of all, Kyrie Irving's value is not very high. He's been highly inconsistent in terms of his availability. Now, when he's actually on the court, he is a very great player. He's an all-star level caliber player, and he's somebody who would definitely help some of these teams come the postseason to maybe advance further than they probably would have without him. But at the same time, Brooklyn maybe looks at Kyrie Irving on his expiring and say, okay, teams that have cap space, maybe San Antonio, Houston, Orlando. Do we really think Kyrie's going to any of those teams? The Nets necessarily do not have to trade Kyrie Irving. Now, if I was running the show there and if I got anything of any value, I would really consider doing it because I'd want to wash my hands of Kyrie Irving and the situation ongoing with him right now and try to rebuild this thing around Kevin Durant. But that's tougher to do than it is to say. It's way easier to say, oh, we'll trade Kyrie, get assets, and move off of him and rebuild around Durant. That's nice and easy to say that, but it's just not that easy to do it. So, with Chris Haynes reporting here, Brooklyn Nets say Kyrie Irving, with right calf soreness, is out tonight against the Washington Wizards. Definitely giving the franchise a little bit of time to keep him out of the limelight, keep his trade request as in-house as they can. Obviously, it's been reported on. The whole world knows about it, but this way Kyrie Irving probably will not have media availability tonight and likely will not be asked about it, giving Brooklyn a little bit of time to figure out their direction. Here with Kyrie Irving, probably have some in-house discussions and keep Kyrie Irving off of a platform, which I think is important to do. We have 5 different trades across 4 different teams here talking about Kyrie Irving. Again, the Nets necessarily do not have to say yes to any of these deals. So I think there's some interesting proposals in here, but we'll look and see if this is anything that you think they should actually accept. First one here is with the Miami Heat. And this is one of the few examples where I think the Nets could potentially end up with a first round pick in this trade. What happens here? Miami goes out and gets Kyrie Irving. Right now, at this current juncture, I feel like Miami, of the 4 teams I have presented here, is the least likely to go out and make a trade for Kyrie Irving. Although I do think that if they were to trade for him, the trio of Kyrie, Jimmy, and Bam would likely be good enough to at least make a push to maybe the NBA Finals. They would really give Boston a run for their money. Kyrie Irving gives them everything they would need in the half court in terms of offensive creation with the ball in his hands. And Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler have been awesome this year. I don't think there's enough love to those Miami Stars with the way that they've been playing. And Kyle Lowry's been a problem, which is why this first round pick is attached. His contract is not a positive for the Miami Heat right now, and it would not be a positive for the Brooklyn Nets. You also get Dwayne Dedmon here, who I do think Miami does want to get off of. Of course, there's been some issues with his behavior. Of course, he shot the bird to somebody in a game this season as well. So Dwayne Dedmon's been kind of an interesting role player for the Miami Heat this season, and not interesting in the ways you really want a role player to be. So you attach a 2023 first round pick, top 10 protected, likely isn't a problem there. The Heat probably make the postseason this year, especially if they do trade for Kyrie Irving. I just would be surprised if they don't. So this pick likely conveys to Brooklyn. And now from Brooklyn's perspective, why is this something you should consider? Well, currently they have 2 tradable first round picks. They have the first this year, in which they moved off of in a deal with Royce O'Neal. And then they also have the 2027 first they have the 2027 first from Philadelphia as well in the Ben Simmons James Harden swap. So they have 2 tradable firsts. You make this deal, you now have 3 of them, which would let you go back out into the market. Maybe this could become a 3-team framework where Kyle Lowry gets rerouted somewhere else. Maybe say a Utah. I know the Clippers have expressed a little bit of interest in Kyle Lowry. I don't think that's going to go anywhere, though, ultimately. So it's going to be tricky, but this way you do have 3 first-round picks. And worst case, if you don't figure out a deal, this trade deadline with moving that 2023 first on draft night, you could reroute it somewhere else. We've seen them do that in the past in the the offseason where they traded for Landry Shamet. They actually moved the pick that became Sadiq Bey, and Luke Kennard went from Detroit over to LA in that one. So we've seen Sean Marks be active on the trade deadline. We've seen him also be active on draft night about trading away picks. So I think this is a framework that does make a little bit of sense for Brooklyn, although I don't think this is very likely. I would pin Miami as the least likely team on this list to actually trade for him. I don't think that they're as desperate as the other three teams. And to be honest, there's two teams that are way more desperate than even the third team. Lowry probably will never play in Brooklyn. I would be kind of surprised if this deal does happen, but this is kind of Miami's perspective on it. Of course, they have been linked to Kyrie Irving a little bit since this whole trade request went down about 24 hours ago. Now we look at one here between the Brooklyn Nets and Phoenix Suns. The Suns have been linked to Kyrie Irving as well. New owner coming in. This would be surprising to me if a deal like this does actually go down as well. Just giving kind of the situation with Kyrie, it just doesn't seem like a James Jones, Monty Williams move. But the new owner, Matt Ishbia, will have control of the team by the NBA trade deadline from reporting that I've heard. And because of that, anything's possible. He could ultimately come in and make some big time decisions about who he wants on his team. And Kyrie Irving requesting a trade literally simultaneously as he gains control of the team maybe opens the door to that. Chris Paul is well into his late 30s, and his play this year has been a little bit up and down. Now, he's not a bad player. He's still a solid player, but looking at the contract, is that solid? No. This is one of the frameworks that actually keeps the Brooklyn Nets way more competitive and much more competitive than that Miami Heat offer this year as well, in my opinion. So they trade Kyrie Irving to Phoenix, and in return, they get Chris Paul and that contract. Now, Chris Paul and Kevin Durant, that's still a pretty solid duo. I think CP3 could really work very well with Nick Claxton, especially as a rim run, lob threat off of the pick and roll. I think Chris Paul gives them a little bit of that mid-range scoring element that they would lose with Kyrie Irving. Now, of course, he does it to a lesser extent than Kyrie, but he at least keeps some of that offensive flow there. And he's a smarter defensive player than Kyrie Irving, although his physical limitations are starting to become more and more apparent. But that's why the addition here of Jay Crowder is very important. I think Brooklyn's already going to be looking around the market for a little bit more size, a little bit more length on the wing. Jay Crowder's a perfect fit into that. And if you attach his money and Chris Paul's money, it's almost equivalent to Kyrie Irving in terms of the cap impact. Now, that extra $1.6 million for Brooklyn will end up costing them nearly $5 million because of the luxury tax. So it is spendy for Joe Tsai and the ownership there in Brooklyn. But you also get a second round pick here from Phoenix to help mitigate that. Now, it's not to the level of a first rounder, but I do see it somewhat difficult to get a first round pick for Kyrie Irving this trade deadline, unless you're trading to one specific team, which we'll talk about at the end of this video. This one here, I think the Nets stay decent. I think the Suns play really well still with this. Kyrie Irving and Devin Booker would be a very lethal scoring backcourt. But if I'm Phoenix, it's just really hard for me to go from someone who is super stable as a player in Chris Paul, who, I know he misses time with injuries, especially come playoff time. His body seems to break down. Kyrie Irving just might not show up when you need him most. I said this in the live stream yesterday. Imagine it's Game 7 of the NBA Finals, and then a headline pops up that Kyrie Irving not at the arena. He does not show up for the game today. Would that be completely surprising to you? And if the answer to that is no, then that's a flaw with Kyrie Irving, and that's a reason why GMs and executives have to be really careful about trading for this guy, especially if there's plans to keep him around long-term, which, to be frank, I can't really see a way in which that makes sense. The only reason Phoenix even ponders this here is if they're looking at Chris Paul's contract negatively, although CP3 does have a very close relationship with Monty Williams. Next deal now is with the probably second most desperate team this trade deadline. That's the Dallas Mavericks, and desperation usually breeds terrible decision making. This here's an example of not bad decision making if you're Dallas, and ultimately probably a deal that does not get done. Again, Brooklyn can just wait with Kyrie Irving and call his bluff about going into free agency, and if he's going to actually leave the Brooklyn Nets or not. That's kind of the route that the Nets can take. They could say, hey, look, we don't really think a team's going to give you a big contract in free agency, especially when you want to go to, so we'll just sit and wait. We'll see what happens. But if they don't, this is a deal where you at least get some of the rotation players back that you need. JaVale McGee's just in here strictly to match money. I know that he's not a positive player in this deal. I'm not looking at him that way. The two positive players in here are Reggie Bullock and Tim Hardaway Jr. You could argue that with the way THJ shot the ball the last 2 weeks or so, that maybe he's not a positive player. I think next to Kevin Durant, it's a little bit different. We've seen, players take massive steps forward in their actual production next to a guy like KD, just because of how much attention he draws as a scorer himself. Now, I know you can say, well, THJ does that with Luka. The way that they stagger their minutes there a lot of Tim Hardaway Jr. shots come, from really, really deep behind the three-point line, and a decent amount of them come with Luka off the court as well. So it's a little bit different. Reggie Bullock could be a nice defensive piece for them. He's really good at defending guards out on the perimeter, which could be very helpful for this Brooklyn Nets team come playoff time. Maybe you put him on Malcolm Brogdon at certain points against the Celtics, or you have him guard Drew Holiday against the Bucks. There's important players that you have to stop, and you look at a matchup against, say, Cleveland. You're going to have bodies to try and stop Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and interestingly enough, Reggie Bullock drew the Donovan Mitchell assignment last year against the Jazz for a good part of that series and did relatively well on him as the Mavericks beat the Jazz last year. Those three players, it fills out the Nets rotation a little bit, helps them in terms of depth, but again, for trading away Kyrie Irving, can you actually look at this and say, oh, we're better because of this? And if the answer to that's no, then it's hard for me to see the Nets actually making this deal. You get 3 second-round picks in here as sweetener. Again, if I'm the Nets, I'd probably say no to this. If Tim Hardaway Jr.'s contract was 1 year shorter, I'd maybe consider it even more. But just with where I'm currently at, I'm just saying I don't think the Nets are going to make this deal. And then we get into our final team, and we have 2 trades here to discuss for this team. It's the Los Angeles Lakers, who, in my opinion, are the most desperate team this NBA trade deadline with where they currently sit in the Western Conference. They have a little bit of ground to make up, and Russell Westbrook's played really well for them, but I think they are trying to move off of him long term, and I think they look at Kyrie Irving as the perfect fit next to Anthony Davis and LeBron James in terms of talent. Obviously, the off-court stuff, probably not the perfect fit. His availability, you never really know. But from a skill perspective, someone who is a lethal mid-range shot creator but can also shoot from deep. He's been very effective in a spot-up role off of LeBron James in his career. We've already seen that in Cleveland. Now a little bit further on in his career, I think he would be just as successful in that. And you also add Joe Harris here in this first deal. Of course, I have 2 of them with the Los Angeles Lakers. Kyrie, Joe Harris to the Lakers for Russell Westbrook, Patrick Beverley, and a 2027 first-round pick, completely unprotected. I know a lot of people keep saying, oh, the Lakers, they should give up 2027 and 2029. It's really tough for me to see them doing that. They're basically outbidding themselves in that race. Remember, let's think about the other trades. We talked about Miami giving up Kyle Lowry in a protected first. We talked about the Mavericks not really being willing to offer a first. We talked about the Suns. Chris Paul's kind of their best trade asset. The Lakers, they kind of control the market right now because they have the best asset to give up. 2027 first, completely unprotected. That's more than any other team, in my opinion, is going to be willing to give up. There is no reason to offer that 2029 first as well. And if Brooklyn decides, hey, we're going to keep Kyrie Irving, if you're the Lakers, you say, okay, we'll probably renounce the rights to Rui Hachimura in free agency. We're going to open up cap space and we're going to try and sign Kyrie Irving ourselves. And then that way we still have our 2027 and 2029 first round pick. Yes, you lose Rui Hachimura, but it's definitely a deal that you would like to make, especially going into this offseason with cap space. So the only reason to really do this deal is also adding Joe Harris, who's a solid shooter. I know this year he's not having as good of a year as we historically have known him to have, but he's still a solid fit onto the Lakers roster and would be an upgrade, in my opinion, over Patrick Beverley in terms of fit. So is that worth the 2027 first? To me, yes, it's the only way that the Lakers can take a step forward this year and, potentially make it into the top 6 in the Western Conference, which I do think is very important to them. For a team like the Lakers, you really want to avoid the play-in game. You do not want to have to try and get in a win-or-go-home situation even before the playoffs start. So definitely a scary situation for the Lakers if they get there. But trading for Kyrie, keeping him around, I do think there is a little bit of benefit here for the Lakers in doing a deal like this. And now we got the mind-numbing, the groundbreaking trade here, the one that I do not think is going to happen, but I wanted to talk about just because I think it's going to get floated around the media a little bit. The Lakers and Nets discuss another framework of a deal where there's a little bit more stuff given up. Interestingly enough, the Lakers do not have to attach that much more money. This also significantly helps the Brooklyn Nets with the luxury tax bill, while also giving them a young player and a defensive guy in Patrick Beverley. So for this deal, the Lakers get Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons. I think right now with the way Simmons has played this year, he maybe is considered one of the most negative contracts in the NBA. And because of that, the Nets would be willing to get off of him. And to be honest, with the way the Lakers are ran, the way Rob Pelinka thinks, the way Rob Pelinka team builds, he doesn't care what the contract looks like. He doesn't care about the fit on the roster. He cares about the name on the back of the jersey and the name on the contract. He says, oh, that's Ben Simmons. That's a star. And to be honest, the Lakers will operate that way because they're poorly ran, poorly GM'd. Rob Pelinka does not deserve a job. Somehow he got a contract extension this past offseason. None of that made sense to me. But Kyrie Irving and Simmons go to the Lakers for Russell Westbrook. And since Russ's contract is so high, him and Patrick Beverley and Max Christie, the three of them, allow you to get close enough to matching money here within 125% according to NBA trade rules to actually facilitate this deal, which again would really significantly help Brooklyn save money against the tax. Their tax savings would be roughly $36 million because of this, actually a little bit closer to 37. So getting Russ, I think for the Nets, a lot of people love to, hate on Russ. First of all, there's a reason he's been such a good player in his career. There's a reason he's a former MVP, multi-time All-Star, multi-time All-NBA. There's a reason that when he puts up a triple-double, his team wins like 75% of the time or some whatever crazy statistic it is. Patrick Beverley, we've seen him go toe-to-toe against Kevin Durant in the postseason before and has actually gotten the better of him in certain situations. I think back to the 8-seed Clippers versus the 1-seed Warriors, where there was a game where Patrick Beverley forced Kevin Durant into 9 turnovers and KD only shot 8 times. That was one of the most impressive defensive performances I've ever seen in the postseason. Patrick Beverley, I think, would be welcomed in Brooklyn with the way Jacques Vaughn is kind of controlling minutes right now. He is putting a pure emphasis on defense. And because of that, Beverley probably does actually fit into a role here with the Brooklyn Nets. And then you also get Max Christie, former second-round pick this past year, picked in the top 40 picks of the NBA draft. There's a little bit of value here. Now, does he change your world? Definitely not. But for the Nets, it's about, okay, how many young players can we get? And when you're trading away Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons right now, there's not a lot of teams willing to give up young players for them. Max Christie is one of the few that would likely be available. Plus, in here, you get the 2027 first unprotected, and you get a lottery protected 2029 first round pick that would be a backup protection into the second round. So if that pick were not to convey, it just becomes a second rounder for Brooklyn, which is a way for the Lakers to kind of cover their assets a little bit. Later on, they could still trade that pick in the lottery. They could trade their protected portion of that as well, which opens them up to making another potential trade. We've seen David Griffin do that in the past for the New Orleans Pelicans. So there's definitely interesting components to this here for the Lakers if they were to make a deal like this. Now, I think Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons are two of the best players that they could possibly land in a trade. Now, I know a lot of people are really low on Ben Simmons. The one thing I'm going to say is he's shortly removed from back surgery. So, you look at Dwight Howard as well after his back surgery, where he was and then where he ended up getting back to at some point. The first year is always the roughest. So you're trading for Ben Simmons right now with the understanding that he's not going to be 100% this year. We're hoping he gets even to 90, 95% by next season. And then hopefully he's at least a solid player on that contract. It's possible he's not, but the Lakers, this is one of the few avenues to end up with a star player and another guy who can kind of facilitate and play make for the team, probably off the bench, to be honest, I think is where Simmons would fit. Now that's another interesting topic and debate, which, we'll not cover in this video. But these are the trades I looked at. Let me know which one in the comment section is your favorite. Let me know if there's any teams I missed. I think that for the most part, these 4 teams are the most likely to trade for Kyrie Irving, with I think the Lakers really being the front runner, which is why I saved them for last. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more. And remember, we're going to be live all NBA trade deadline week long, talking about potential flips, mock trades like you saw in this video, and a whole bunch of other great stuff coming out on the channel that week. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our content, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.